No! It can't be! No! No! How could this have happened?
No. 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 You must die!
You see where I'm going with this? You know, I've been disappointed by games in the past. It's nothing new. But very rarely am I truly sad that a game doesn't live up to expectation. Unfortunately, that's the story of Enotria: The Last Song. A Souls-like inspired by Italian folklore, my heritage. This game was literally made for me. I was obligated to play this game. I thought we were gonna get a solid Souls-like. I mean, they've been raising the bar, especially with Lies of P and, depending on how you view it, Black Myth Wukong. And when I played the demo, I thought it was pretty good. Didn't blow me away, but it sold me on it. But I thought the game would get better as it went on, past what was shown in the demo, but it doesn't. It's a shame to say because I actually enjoyed my time with Enotria. I like the game. There are some things to like about it, but this is the first big game made by Giamma Games, and it really feels like it. No matter how much you can feel the passion when you play this game, the areas are absolutely beautiful. The mechanics they try to add in make the game feel unique. You can clearly tell they tried to make this game stand out and really make something great here. But unfortunately, they just didn't have the talent or the expertise needed to fully realize it. And that doesn't mean these guys are bad developers. It's just that Souls-likes are a whole different beast to make. And there's a reason that it has taken developers this long to close the gap between From Software. And there's a fine line between a Lies of P and a Steel Rock. Get that shit away from me. To everyone watching this, and to anyone at Giamma who by some miracle happens to come across this video, the purpose of this is not to bash or disrespect the effort you made in making Enotria. It is solely to point out the problems and the areas you need to improve on if you want to keep making Souls-likes, because the groundwork is there. And they know this too. They've recently come out with a roadmap of improvements to make, which is good that they're taking feedback, but what I'm gonna say is designed to make sure this doesn't have to be a thing next time. So, what exactly are the shortcomings of Enotria, and what are some of the things it does well? Well, time to dance our way into this. So strap in, boys and girls, and let's get down to business. So Enotria takes place in the land of, well, Enotria, a land created by the power and wonders of the music and the arts. But the land has become ensnared by an evil spell known as the Carnavaccio, which has turned the world into one giant eternal play, where time has become stagnant and all the inhabitants take up different roles. But you are the maskless one, a person without a role that is destined to stop the authors of this play and put an end to this twisted nightmare. With the opening cutscene, you get the full rundown of all the... Wait. Why do I feel like somebody should be talking right now? That's the first thing I noticed about Enotria, and it kind of stuck with me through the whole game. It feels unfinished, especially with the voice lines. Besides Pulcinella and the NPCs you find in the Theater of Masks, the people you find out in the world have dialogue, but they just aren't voiced, and it's really trippy.
Is there anyone alive out there?
Now, at first I thought this was a design choice, maybe because since Pulcinella is one of the authors, he has maybe twisted it so nobody else would have a true voice besides him, and maybe if you beat the game, they get voices in New Game Plus or something. But then you see the NPCs in the theater fully voiced, and then you see the improvement roadmap, which includes a voiceover for the opening cutscene, and it's like, no, they just didn't have time to put it in. Or it's the completely wrong voice line said.
Supreme victory!
Guys, if that's the case, then just delay the game a bit. Nobody's gonna push back on that, especially as an indie studio. Take all the time you need. And if I'm wrong, and that was a genuine design choice, it wasn't the right one. But it's not just the voice lines that make the game feel unfinished. It also rears its head with the gameplay. So, Enotria's gameplay. Look, I don't really know how else to say this, but Enotria is janky. But I kinda like it? I'm not gonna lie, despite everything, I thought the gameplay was pretty good. I had fun playing it, but I don't know if it's just because I like Souls-like, so this combat type automatically clicks with me. But then I went back and played games like Mortal Shell, and I'm like, nope, this is good combat. But hands down, the best core mechanic in this game is the parry. I don't know what it is about this thing, but this was the most satisfying thing to do in this game. And the sound is just, mwah. And of course, when you parry, you contribute to the enemy's stagger meter. But get this, you know how else you can stagger enemies? Parrying projectiles. Physics? Who gives a shit? Bend over, you little blow-up doll. But again, I did mention the gameplay feels unfinished, and that specifically comes with the animations and the movements. The enemy attack animations feel really janky. There is no flow at all. Like, to the point where an animation stops and then snaps to a separate animation completely different from the point you just ended at. This was specifically a problem with these gatekeeper bosses. Like, look at this transition. Talk about stop and start. But it's not just the enemies. Your character doesn't feel all that polished either, especially the dodge, which feels fine when you do it on its own, but the transition from parry to dodge does not feel right at all. And this running attack you have, what's with this long-ass wind-up? You can't do this faster. They know this, and they're gonna make improvements to the movement in the coming months, so I'm not going crazy with this. But again, instead of promising to fix it later, why didn't you just take a few more months to polish things out more? But outside of the core gameplay, in order to stop the evil Kana Faucio and his giant mask mandate, we have a bunch of other mechanics. And I mean, a bunch. As the maskless one, you can absorb the different roles of enemies you find out in the world and receive their masks. Each mask comes with their own stats and different perks, things like increased heavy damage, more maximum health, more souls when killing enemies, and other things like that. And the most interesting mechanic Enotria introduces is the loadout system. You can have 3 loadouts, each with a mask and weapons of your choosing, and you can swap between them at any point. But then you have 4 hotkey abilities or lines that can go into each loadout, and a skill tree to unlock more perks that you can have equipped, along with the second main perk that your mask can have. Oh my god, look at all this customization. This is great. I can buff my character up however I want, and I can do it 3 times. Oh my god, those rascals won't stand a chance. So about that, when you have to keep track of a mask perk, a secondary perk, 4 hotkey abilities that don't actually show what they do, and 6 passive perks, and you multiply that times 3 for each, in Enotria The Last Song, you have to remember the total details of 3 mask perks, 3 secondary perks, 12 hotkey abilities, and 18 passive perks. 36 stats.
I think it's too much.
Good f***ing luck. And when you throw in Awakening, Ardor Burst, and weapon effects, guys, just calm down, please. Yeah, I lied. Each main mask perk has a second perk to that perk that activates once you become awakened, which in order to do, you need to perform a visceral attack. I don't know about you, I may have missed the tutorial pop-up, but I had no idea what that was until maybe 3/4 of the way through the game. And even then, I'm sorry, that's a dumb mechanic. You need to stagger an enemy just so a perk can activate? What's the point of that? They know this, and they're taking it out. Good. You also have the Ardor Burst. Guys, I'm sorry. Does anyone actually use this in combat? I know it's mainly used to change the area layout, and you can upgrade the damage that it does, but I never once used this outside of that. It just wasn't worth it. It's way too much stuff to just throw at the player early on, and it doesn't lead to long-term learning. Like, I've gotten to the end of the game, and I still don't know what Fatuo does. Oh, wait. I guess it allows you to heal when you hit afflicted enemies. Thanks, Epic Games. Speaking of, on top of the tax legislation you have to keep track of, we also have weapon ailments, or the 4 Banes. These are different effects you can have and effects that your weapons can dole out. But for some reason, each effect has a positive and a negative. Aside from Fatuo, this lowers your defense, but also gives you more damage and stamina regeneration. Gratia is essentially this game's version of bleed damage. When the meter builds up, it explodes and deals a good chunk of health. But if you don't get that last hit in when the meter fills up, it can also heal the afflicted enemy. And Milano is poison, but along with draining their health, it afflicts those close to it. So if you get up close to a poison enemy, your poison meter fills up too, so you literally have to back off until they suffer the appropriate poison death. Why is this so needlessly complicated? Was this really necessary? You don't think you went a little overboard with this? If you think me describing all of this to you sounds confusing, imagine trying to figure this out while playing. And you can't view the pop-ups again. I tried going through the compendium to see if there's a section to look at them again if you were to forget, but there's not. You either learn it in the beginning or you're screwed. The only thing you really need to know with this is that some enemies, especially bosses, will be strong in one area and weak to another, which means you can use a weapon with said ailment to be the most effective against them. Now, remembering this would have also been bad, and the devs knew this, which is why they put a little rock, paper, scissors diagram in the corner at all times. That I actually appreciate. So let's take a step back here. When you look at the entire picture with all these mechanics, you're not going to be able to keep track of them throughout the whole game. So you as a player are going to do certain things. I don't know what these ailments do, but the big bad enemies need to be hit with certain ones, so why invest in normal weapons? I'm just going to use the ones that deal ailments, which completely cuts out 75% of the weapon offerings in this game because everyone needs to be funneled into specific types of damage. All these perks are way too much to keep track of, so you know, I'm just going to use the loadout system purely if I need to use a different weapon, which makes the mask line and perk system irrelevant because the player no longer cares about it. Or the flip side, I have perks I really care about. Let me just put them all on one character, beef this guy up, and if I need a specific weapon ailment, I'll just switch it to him when I get a chance. Which completely invalidates the need for the loadout system, which is the most interesting thing about this game. You see how in order to make the gameplay easier to understand, you have to cut out different parts of it? If that is not a clear sign that your game has way too many unnecessary mechanics, then I don't know what does. So now we turn to the level design, and this is actually pretty good. There's about 4 major areas. What? What was
so wonderful.
What the fuck? Dies of cringe. Quinta, the Monastery of Maja, Felicia Magna, and Letumnia. And all of these places look incredible. The Renaissance-like art direction is probably the best thing about Enotria, because after all, Italians are best at making art. And chicken parm. Parm or franchise? Comment below. Quinta is the Italian sunset backdrop with a town that looks like it just got done with Carnival. You got random masked enemies walking around like they're drunk, dancing in the streets, playing instruments, all the while you have festive music playing in the background. Honestly, doesn't really seem like a dangerous place. Holy shit, this guy's massive! It's also where you find your first combat rift, where you willingly give yourself to pain in order to open another way forward, or if you just want a challenge. But this is the first area that really sets the weird, twisted Italian Souls tone, and it really doesn't feel that dark. But then, you got the Monastery of Maja, a place dedicated to the worship of the goddess of death, Maja. A complete 180. Just look at this place. The fallen nuns of the monastery shoot dark magic orbs at you, to which I promptly knock that shit out of here. It's around this time where most enemies start requiring different ailments to make fighting them easier, because when you first fight them with normal weapons, you do basically nothing. But what the game does is right before, there's a chest that gives you the Blessed Rapier, which deals massive radiant damage, and is also the best weapon in the game. Essentially telling the player, hey, you're probably gonna need this. This place also has the best color scheme in the game, hands down. I mean, as soon as you walk in, you're like... Then once we're done with the evil Vatican, we have Felicia Magna, which is ancient Roman inspired, huge marble cliffs, a grand city in the distance, the giant Colosseum towards the end. It looks phenomenal. You also got Roman inspired enemies, soldiers in togas throwing javelins at you, centurions as bosses, stone colossi, giant crabs.
Mr. Krabs is a retard.
Why did you put these here? There's also underground cave sections, which admittedly are not as good as the above ground areas, but it's still pretty fun going through them. Again, another great area. And then we have Letumnia, which is essentially Venice, a city on the water, a city of knowledge, astronomy, filled with fallen nobles with rapiers, high-end townsfolk with fatuo torches, whatever the hell this is. There's one section where you have to find different switches to lower the water in one specific section, because as you know, this is a Souls game, nobody can swim. Although, when you pull these things, there's no actual indication of what these things do. You just pull it and nothing happens, so you're like, what? would have liked to see a cutscene of the water going down, or at least hear some rushing water. As you get closer to the astronomer's court, you get ladies with sights and solar system models on their heads, little spider machine things, big mechanical soldiers. It's great. There's a lot of imagination that went into everything here, and that is the biggest positive I can give Enotria, is that the level design and the areas themselves are really, really good. But the biggest negative is unfortunately the precise reason why we came here. Unfortunately, it's time to talk the boss, baby. I'm sorry guys, Enotria's bosses are not good. No matter what way you slice it, it's not good. They're not criminally designed bullshit. Well, except whatever the hell the High Priestess of Veltha was.
Oh, that's real nice.
But when looking at the entire package, they all suffer from the same jankiness with their animations, so every fight has absolutely zero flow, and the animations themselves aren't even interesting, so each attack looks about as basic as you can get. And on top of that, none of them feel epic, and most of the mini-bosses are unimaginative, just either stronger enemies you would find out in the world anyway, or reskin fights, some not even posing a challenge. There are some good bosses, specifically Vermiglio the Red Prior, maybe Captain Spaventa, and shit. But even then, in any Souls-like, I would put these in something like B tier. Certainly nothing that made me say, wow, what an amazing boss fight. Now, I don't expect you to be on the level of From Software on your first ever Souls-like. That's not the point I'm trying to make here. But just having cool bosses with snappy and interesting movesets is really all you have to do, and there's not a lot of it here. Just look at something like Lies of P. Take the King of Puppets and compare it to every boss in Enotria. It's not even a question. Or something small. Take a boss like Zanny and compare it with fallen Archbishop Andreas, at least the first phase, which honestly was the first thing that came to mind when I first saw Zanny. Granted, we don't get any antipasto.
The feast goes on. My lovely antipasto.
Even a literal goddess like Veltha doesn't feel epic. Where's the damn blaring church hymns and shit? Why does she feel so basic? Per favore, Dio lasciami attaccare. Via fiamme Dio lasciami attaccare. But let's focus on the main bosses, the ones that actually matter. And if you don't want to be spoiled by the bosses I mentioned, here's the timestamp to skip it. And let's roll. The first big one I mentioned earlier, Vermiglio the Red Prior. This guy's pretty cool. He's all about shooting wicked orbs at you while boasting about how he's the most holy and how you should be thanking him for delivering your salvation. Motherfucker, go back to the Adeptus Mechanicus before I put the Emperor's boot up your ass. Insert priest joke here. Oh, wait, shit. The Red Prior is a good boss fight. Zanny, though, sucks. His body is under his head. The camera sucks. I don't know what attack he's doing. It's terrible. I hated this. The only saving grace was his voice lines.
So young, so sour. You lack seasoning.
Captain Spaventa is another pretty good boss. He looks great, this conquistador looking armor and helmet, but they need to go into this guy's code and jack the speed up because this base combo feels so monotonous. If you jack that up, coupled with his ground stop and his blunderbuss, things would get much better. Also, is this move supposed to miss every time? And thank you so much for helping me to remember Mikolash.
You've got to be fucking kidding me.
Next, we got John Gurgolo, and I would absolutely love this way more if his attacks didn't feel jank as hell. Again, it's a common theme we're gonna run into here, but fighting a gigantic lion in a coliseum is a cool backdrop, and this guy can hit like a brick. Also built up by Pulcinella saying, no, don't go this way, and then he's like, alright, fine, you live with your own mistakes, pretty much foreshadowing the ass whooping John Gurgolo gives you, which by the way, turns out he was actually the Lord Commander of the Felicia Magna army, which upon finding out he unwillingly aided in the creation of the Canavaccio, he left the land and came back to duel Veltha out of vengeance, but he was defeated and turned into this beast, which, damn, we just killed a good guy. And finally, we have Pantalone and Balanzone, a duo fight. Actually pretty well designed. Balanzone will stand back and shoot projectiles at you while Pantalone comes at you with melee. Works pretty well, but again, I don't feel anything when I'm fighting them. Then they merge into one, and the fight becomes stupid easy. Overall, I'd rather have Enotria's bosses be the way they are than be bullshittily designed. Is that even a word? But if I'm gonna judge these bosses by today's Souls-like standards, it doesn't meet them. It starts with animation quality, but it also comes down to the animations themselves. If JAMA is gonna make another Souls-like in the future, both have to be better than this. Now, I would talk about Enotria's story and lore, but honestly, I don't really have anything to say about it, so I feel like I should just end it right here. I take no pleasure in saying this, but Enotria is one of my personal most disappointing games of the year. I think so far that title still belongs to Dragon's Dogma 2 this year, but I really thought this game would be better than it actually was. But the silver lining is it's not entirely bad. There are things about this game that are really good, and it was actually fun to play, but this game is way too janky to be considered one of the better Souls-likes, and its bosses are certainly not good enough. And that's a problem when that is the most important thing to nail in games like this. Now, some of the problems I talked about may have already been fixed in patches as we speak, but I played the game when it launched. That means nothing to me now. My playtime is what counts here. It should not have been this way. And you're not a big AAA studio with an already established fan base like a CD Projekt Red or still somehow Bethesda. You're not going to have already invested fans that are willing to give the game a second chance, or content creators that play it again to make update videos or something like that. You are an unknown. You essentially have one chance, and you have to treat your development like that. Again, none of this is meant to insult or berate JAMA. They're a small studio, and this was clearly a passion project for them. And they are taking this feedback and making changes, and I think they can get better at this if they want to do another one of these. But right now, they need to take some time to refine their skills, and maybe one day, I can mention you among those that are closing the Souls gap. This one hurt. This one hurt bad. But Enotria, the last song, gets a 6 out of 10.